of the NBA Finals, enough of this pastime glory. I get it. Wheeler, we're done with the 80s. We're done with the 90s and 2000s and 2010s. But, as a basketball fan, as a sports junkie, that kind of stuff just I feel is always important to talk about because as we prepare, because we're preparing for perhaps the biggest NBA Finals in history, because the backstory between the Mavericks and Celtics, this is absurd. This is absolutely crazy. But the first question I got in regards to the 2024 NBA Finals that begins tomorrow night, and I'll do a brief little episode of Wheeler Takes before the finals tomorrow. My question is, who's going to be the biggest X factor in the 2024 NBA Finals? Is it going to be P.J. Washington or is it going to be Kristaps Porzingis? And we know Kristaps Porzingis has been cleared to compete again in this NBA postseason. He got injured during the first round series against the Miami Heat, but he's back. Porzingis had himself a really excellent year. He was averaging 20 points per game with 7.5 rebounds and on 51% field goal percentage. And this was a very, very impressive year for Porzingis, who just joined the Celtics team with Jrue Holiday. So the Celtics are loaded up from top to bottom with JT, JB, Derek White, Al Horford, and Porzingis and Jrue Holiday. So that team is really deep in depth. And I know a lot of people are saying, the Celtics might win this in 5. And I wouldn't be shocked if they would, but I know my own prediction and how I see this series going. But how the series could go depends on who is going to be the guy that steps up and makes their presence be felt between both teams. And you look at P.J. Washington, in the second round series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who was the number 1 seed, SGA was MVP runner-up. Them, Chet, J-Dub. That's my pick to win the NBA Finals next year. They got 3 first-rounders this year in the NBA draft. That's absolutely absurd. And P.J. Washington was a huge catalyst for why they beat the number 1 seed Thunder. Luka and Kyrie are going to combine for 60, 70 points. And P.J. Washington, though, was averaging 17 points per game. He was hitting a lot of crucial game time shots. He was hitting a lot of 3-pointers. He was taking the ball to the hoop. He was, even though the Dallas Mavericks were struggling from free throw range, even though they were struggling from the chariot strike, even though they struggled from free throw with free throw percentage, P.J. Washington was making all his free throws. I think he was making a couple alley-oops. He was very productive and very efficient in that series. And he's the reason they beat the number 1 seed Thunder. Now, I know he struggled in the series against the Timberwolves, but a lot of these good NBA players, they're going to have their struggles. I mean, Kyrie Irving, he struggled kind of in the Thunder series, but he had some really good games during that series. But even Luka struggled. I mean, it's crazy to say a bad Luka Doncic game could be 25, 8, and 9, even though that's impressive. That's so impressive. But people expect Luka Doncic to put up what he was averaging in his MVP runner-up year, which was a 34-point near triple-double. And I think that's very impressive enough to say that a bad Luka Doncic game is 25 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists. And I'm a Luka Doncic fan. That's my favorite basketball player in the league. He's been my favorite player since he got drafted. So I've been waiting a long, long, long time for Luka to get into this position. But speaking of Luka Doncic, this is a very interesting dilemma here. Luka Doncic is under the age of 27. He's going to be matched up with another player who's under the age of 27, a guy who I think was a top 5 MVP runner-up this year as well, and that's Jayson Tatum. This is a great duel that's going to take place between these 2 young stars. Jayson Tatum was averaging 27 points per game and 8 rebounds, and Luka Doncic was averaging a near 34-point triple-double. A lot of scoring between both these teams, where Tatum last year had his best season of all time, where he averaged 30.1 points per game, took the Celtics to their 5th Eastern Conference Finals trip in his 4 years in the league. So, yeah, Jayson Tatum took the Celtics to Game 7 after being down 3-0 And like even in some of those games, like before in the Philadelphia 76ers game, he had like in a game 7, he had like 51 points, like which is a lot for a Celtics player in a playoff game. Because historically, Larry Bird's been that guy and Paul Pierce, but Jayson Tatum, I actually have to add this. I have to say this because, this is my little brother's favorite player. I think Jayson Tatum's the most hated NBA player in NBA history. Because every time I watch YouTube videos, every time I go relook at Instagram comments, every time I scroll on Twitter, it's always, is Jayson Tatum being carried by the team? Is Jayson Tatum, being a guy that isn't who the Celtics say he is? Is Jayson Tatum a historic choker? Is he the guy that the Celtics really leaning on to take them back to glory? Because we know the Celtics, they can't never stay bad for too long because they're the Boston Celtics. They're the most celebrated team in NBA history. But he has a pretty good matchup with Luka Doncic because if you want to be honest, if you could say who's the hero and who's the superhero, who's the super villain in this matchup between two bona fide top 5 MVP runner-ups, I definitely will say it's Luka Doncic is the super villain and Jayson Tatum's the superhero.